Okay, so we started by looking at what skills we had on hand and what the time constraints were, and we concluded that it was going to be very tough to do lots and lots of deep analysis, although other people have to some extent proven us wrong. But we do have machine learning expertise and so on. But we decided that we were going to take a deductive role, an inductive approach, start with a big idea and see if we could derive any support from that, from the data. So we wondered where might the best opportunities for growth lie in the world. So we looked for countries with population growth in the middle income range and that had moderate financial inclusion. And we started by kind of a wider fishing trip, but we quite soon concluded that those countries with the least financial inclusion seemed to be similar to the countries which were poorest. And those countries will inevitably have the least banking infrastructure, and so the least opportunity for near-term growth. So we narrowed it down to this set of countries. And then we did start using some of the data chops and looked, out of this analysis came 30 countries. We kind of honed it down again in various ways, picking those with the largest populations. And the list won't surprise you: Egypt, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. We looked at this range of indicators, which is people under 14 is one of them, and we'll come on to why we did that before now. The rurality of the population, how widespread they are, the financial inclusion index, and forgot what CPI is? Corruption perception index, which correlates with people not using bank accounts because they're afraid that they're going to get ripped off and so on. So we looked at these, and we picked Indonesia as an example. So most of the rest of what I'm going to talk about is Indonesia, and you know, we propose a solution at the end, but it stands as an example of what you could do in this category of countries. And we wanted a comparison country, and because we ran out of time, we haven't been able to include as much of that in this slideshow as we wanted. But we picked Turkey because it's huge, much bigger than most people think in land area. It's undergone fast economic growth and population growth, and it's Islamic. We didn't, unfortunately, get time to go back and do all the comparisons about that, but that's the country we thought was a good comparison. Here we are, Turkey and Indonesia on that. Perhaps the one to most notice is the Global Financial Index. We picked the indicator of how many people have bank accounts. Clearly in Turkey that's now risen to a very high level. In Indonesia it's below 40%. So there's great room for growth in terms of getting people into banking. So then, honing down a little on Indonesia, we began to look at the distribution of banking services, and it's very patchy. Again, Indonesia is huge, 13,000 islands. I've actually been there, and you know, most of the transport between the islands is slow boats and so on, largely agricultural. Some places where there's very good banking infrastructure, and quite wide inequality, financial inequality. So there are a small cadre of rich people and a lot of poorer people, which again, I hope to be able to mention. So we then looked at mobile adoption in Indonesia, and it is one of two very large countries that is below the average. So there's still growth to happen. It is happening fast, and by and large, the widespread adoption of mobiles is a done deal around the world, but these two countries lag a little behind. And there's the astonishing statistic: there is a new user every 6 seconds in Indonesia. It's growing now at the steepest part of the growth curve. And mobile first, of course, that's the vast majority of people haven't had any computer connection before, so that's where you're going to get to them. The point about the widespread, huge geography, by the way, is that it's uneconomic to provide conventional banking infrastructure over such a large area and such a dispersed population. You just don't have enough clusters of people. Looking at young people's adoption of mobile, it's very notable that people, if you look at the yellow and the green, the yellow, relatively modest numbers of youngsters under 15 have a mobile phone, but the big bump is at that leaving school age. Remember that. What are they doing on their phones? Overwhelmingly social media and chat, as you might expect. very consistent use across the generations. But look at internet banking. Huge jump just after leaving school. They're still quite low in their adoption of it, but there's a really notable cliff edge there. Similarly, one of the other teams talked about banking adoption being high in Indonesia. It is. 80% of people who have a mobile phone have downloaded a banking app. They're one of the lowest users proportionally in the world. People are downloading the app and not using it. Interesting. Data use. Voice ARPU seems to have peaked. Data is beginning to climb fast, and this is the pattern you would expect with so many people using mobile social media and so on. So what we need to do then is to get people into doing transactions on the phone, a thing they're not doing. They largely have the equipment, but they're not doing it. So what do we need? We need an app. Okay, app's a tenner penny. What would the app do? You've got this target audience of 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Those people grow up quicker than we do here. By the age of 21, I would guess the majority of them are married, family, land, farming, and so on. So you've got a 5-year window where you're taking a child at school who in 5 years is going to need credit and going to be a customer. At 15, you can't start talking to them about financial apps. So how do you make that transition happen? What you do is create a gamified app. We'll come a bit more onto that. And you find a way of seducing them into the banking ecosystem. Obviously at 15, you can't necessarily be rewarding them financially, but you can be rewarding them with the sorts of things they want, like data credits. And there's a whole list of how you do that sort of gamification idea. I'm sure you'll know that gamification doesn't mean Angry Birds. It just means the intellectual structure of the app that engages people. If any of you know Duolingo, the language learning app, that's a gamified app, but it's not a game. So obviously your intention, your goal is to make it sticky. So you've got huge numbers of people who soon need banking with no credit history. But as we know, if you catch a customer young, they tend to stick with you. And if they have a phone, they use social media. So you need to be engaging somehow with social media. So you start by giving them non-monetary rewards. Interestingly, one of the other factors we found is that the highest e-commerce use, and that's also growing enormously fast, is to buy clothing. Great interest of young people. T-shirt rewards of your favourite football team, etc., etc. So you take them through this slippery slope into banking. In other words, you regard their engagement as being part of a 5-year e-learning course, if you like, which you never tell them is learning, but that's what you're doing. You're gradually changing the game with time, because you know what age they start at and what level of financial sophistication they probably have. And you slowly educate them by changing the way the game works, until at 21, they're going to want a loan. How will it make money? A lot of these are just speculations, but we felt the need to sort of drive towards some kind of proposed solution. The companies can sell marketing insights from people's behaviour on the phone, banking transaction charges, and as time passes, upselling and fees for banking services. Potential competitors, you've clearly got your banking incumbents, you've got the mobile phone companies and potential new startups and so on. It's a complex ecosystem, it's all moving very fast, but we kind of think perhaps a partnership between, there's one dominant mobile phone company and a bank over this might work. Just to go back to one here, Ministry of Education, we thought that perhaps school attendance is often an issue in these places where kids are being pulled to work in the family fields and so on. So if you could partner with the Ministry of Education to gamify a points system that they get in the app, rewards for attendance, and then when they graduate, the government/phone company gives them a smartphone, which you can now get in India for $5. So that's no longer a barrier either. Obviously there are some issues around how do you authenticate people on remote Indonesian islands and so on. That's going to be cracked. There's what we know, physiological biometrics, you know, the fingerprint authentication and so on. There are also passive biometrics. You can measure a person's gait, their walk, and that's a biometric indicator. So all you have to ask for is permission to get that data off their phone. Credit ratings, this is already being worked on by startups, where you use either their social media, social network relationships. With open banking, you'd be able to understand how their relatives were banking. You know, I've got a rich uncle in Jakarta who can stand for me, sort of thing. But you can also have kind of trust sharing. You can share trust as a currency, which is very much what's behind a lot of the crowdsourcing and crowd sharing movement. So you can say, yes, I'll take 10% of the risk of my 16-year-old to take that loan to buy a scooter.
1 minute left, Brandon.
Okay, I think we've only 2 or 3. So these are out of scope at the moment, but they will come. And clearly a lot of the limitations are around not having direct access to a lot of the granular data. So that will take some doing. Thank you very much.